But they sent a letter to the CEO of Google encouraging that they censor pregnancy care centers.
Do you want a wealthy retirement without worrying about money? Welcome to the Retire in Texas podcast, where you will discover how to enjoy your faith, your family, and your freedom in the state of Texas. And now, here's your host, financial advisor, author, and all-around good Texan, Darryl Lyons.
Hey, this is Darryl Lyons, co-founder of PAX Financial Group. Thanks for tuning in to Retire in Texas. Remember, this information is general in nature only. It's not intended to provide specific investment, tax, or legal advice. Visit paxfinancialgroup.com for more information. And I want to encourage you to grab some ebooks on the website. We've got plenty of content on there to further educate yourself on the various topics that are important to all of us today. But the one that gets a lot of traction is Biblical Responsible Investing. That's an ebook that a lot of people are grabbing. So we check the ebooks. I don't know specifically who's getting these ebooks, but I do know the ones that are in demand. So check those out. Biblical Responsible Investing. So in that same theme, I want to talk a little bit about an organization today called Alliance Defending Freedom. You may have heard of Jack Phillips. Jack Phillips was the owner of a Masterpiece Cakeshop in Colorado, and he was asked to bake a cake that would celebrate somebody transitioning from being a male to a female. He could not, in good faith, his deeply held convictions would not allow him to build a cake, and so he declined. He was forced to express a message that also had, I think it was from the same guy, by the way. I think they were both attorneys. He was asked to also bake a cake that was a custom cake for a same-sex wedding, and also a cake with Satan smoking marijuana, and declined all of these. These cases ended up becoming a lawsuit that went to the Colorado Supreme Court and ultimately the United States Supreme Court. But Jack is a small business owner and an artist, and typically there's not a lot of margins in those businesses. Well, I say a small business owner, you never know, but an artist, there's not a lot of zeros on cakes. So how in the world can a guy afford representation all the way through the state and the federal courts? And not just in 2024, but this has been going on since 2012. This does also include plenty of harassments and death threats along his journey. So how in the world does a small business owner and a cake artist afford representation? And that's through Alliance Defending Freedom. They're one of the few firms in the entire world, frankly, that will stand up for those that have deeply held convictions, known as religious freedom. Now, this is just one example, but I'm going to share more and frame it in such a way that you'll understand, hopefully by the end, and maybe I offend you along the way, but stay to the end. But you're going to understand why it's so important that we as a country have an organization like Alliance Defending Freedom. Let's just go into the medical industry for just a second, where doctors and nurses, in some cases, are being forced to facilitate gender transitions, even though federally it violates the federal conscience protections. And that includes vaccines. It includes really all forms of healthcare that violate deeply held convictions. The FDA also plays a role in this. As you would imagine, the three-letter agencies have really become almost a quasi-fourth government agency. You think of the judicial, legislative, and executive branches, but you don't think of the three-letter agencies also being an extension of the government's execution of ideas. But they have been, and the FDA had originally had a requirement that physicians provide oversight and care for somebody who's taking a chemical abortion. And in November of 2022, Alliance Defending Freedom filed a lawsuit against the FDA because if you look at these chemical abortions, I really didn't have a good handle on the scope of the consequences and the potential challenges that exist. As a man, I can't really relate, but I did see some testimonies of some women who took these pills, and I'll put links on our website. It was more than I had expected. I'll just say that. And to allow these medicines, these chemical abortions, to be taken and prescribed, by the way, the FDA, I don't know if they still do, but to not be a licensed physician and to be able to distribute these chemical abortion drugs is really problematic. The Alliance Defending Freedom sued the FDA and said, if somebody's taking these chemical abortion drugs, you have to have a doctor oversee this experience. That's one of the things that Alliance Defending Freedom's been doing in the medical space. We can drift over, since we're talking about abortions, we can drift over to pregnancy care centers. I have personally participated with pregnancy care centers, have some good friends that run them and contributed. I am blown away. These people are very close to angels, in my opinion. Pregnancy care centers, what they do for women, and my heart does go out to many of these women, being a son of a 16-year-old little girl, for lack of a better phrase, because now as a father of a 16-year-old, I can't imagine. But some of these women have no hope, and they go to these pregnancy care centers, and the care that they receive, from diapers to support to just direction, it's unbelievable. And what Elizabeth Warren said about these pregnancy care centers just blows my mind. And since the repeal of Roe versus Wade, these pregnancy care centers have been vandalized. They've been threatened. They've even been firebombed. And in fact, the pro-abortion members have sent letters to Congress, I guess through Congress. I don't know if it's to Congress or through Congress. It must have been through Congress. But they sent a letter to the CEO of Google encouraging that they censor pregnancy care centers. So Alliance Defending Freedom, they've been fighting for pregnancy care centers across the country. I'll also put a link in our website that is an important document for you to read, the truth about pregnancy care centers. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and we need pregnancy care centers in our community. This does extend beyond just healthcare and abortion. Alliance Defending Freedom represented a family in Michigan, Dan and Jennifer Mead. They sent their kids to counseling, or their child to counseling, because they're struggling academically. But what they didn't know was that the school was encouraging that this child of theirs transition their pronouns. The parents had no clue. The parents were not informed. And this is happening a lot in school districts where counseling has been more of in fact, there's plenty of information out there on this, but the reality is that parental rights are being marginalized. And so who in the world is going to stand up for parental rights when schools push a different ideology that's inconsistent with deeply held convictions? And I'm not talking about just notifications. Here's a notification. I'm talking about a parent being actually fully engaged in the entire process. And that's being taken away in many school districts around the country. And Alliance Defending Freedom has fought for many families, including the Mead family. And if you are in business and you're a subcontractor and you get something called a request for proposal for a government contract, or even if you're a general contractor for that matter, you have seen and experienced the administrative challenges of trying to accommodate the diversity, equity, inclusion, and the environmental social governance requirements that really impede business progress. And so we've got to continue to address this because it's become overwhelming and very subjective. What is good social governance? What is diversity? Does diversity include diversity of thought as well? But this is not just domestically. Alliance Defending Freedom actually was representing, and I believe still represents, I don't know if this case is still going on, but somebody who is a member of the Finnish parliament who put in their social media and some brochures Romans 1:24-27. I'll let you look that up on your own. It's my way to nudge you to the Bible. Being on the parliament, a citizen filed a criminal complaint, and this lady, who is a member of parliament, was subject to 5 years of police investigation. This is the same person who was in charge of the police department, now is subject to 5 years of police investigations. And her crime, which could be considered very severe without proper representation, could have potentially, and it didn't, she got acquitted, to 2 years in prison, the severity of the accusations. She was acquitted. Fortunately, Alliance Defending Freedom represented her. And a couple more examples, and then I'll start to wind this down. But the Indigenous Advance Ministry, a ministry represented by a man who really is just an everyday guy, saw him speak, very fine, just humble man. fell in love with the people of Uganda and started a ministry down there to help an orphanage and try to move money from one bank account to another, and found out that his bank account was closed by Bank of America. And they sent him a letter saying that they made a business decision to no longer service their accounts. He went to the branch manager and said, "What's going on?" She goes, "This is ridiculous. I can't believe this. Let me go." And she made a phone call, and she was advised, and this is her words to him, "We are no longer able to service your account. It's a business decision. Please refer to the letter. I can no longer speak to this." So Bank of America, somebody, whether it was the CEO or whether it was mid-level management or somebody who just had a rogue authority, decided to close out their bank account because they had a different world view. Goldman Sachs and Airbnb both have done race-based hiring, which is against the law. There was a lady who wrote the book Irreversible Damage, really very controversial book for those with a different worldview, but very eye-opening. Irreversible Damage, and it was talking about the transitioning of genders. GoFundMe, they said, "We're not going to let you have a GoFundMe account." She didn't set up the GoFundMe account. Somebody else did, because the author became the most hated woman in America. And so somebody set up a GoFundMe account to help her in some capacity. I don't know the reason or who, but GoFundMe said, "No, we're not going to set one up." This has become so problematic that one CEO, I don't know the name of the company, but I heard secondhand, not fourth hand or fifth hand, that one CEO of a company said, "This is taking over our company. This ideology is taking over our company. Somebody please sue us to wake up our company." That was her words. "Please sue us." Alliance Defending Freedom is one of those organizations that will sue to defend the rights of people who have deeply held convictions. They have served 4,300 churches. They have 8 offices around the country. They get 6,500 requests for help every single year. They can't service all of them. But think about it. It takes about $3 or $4 million in legal fees just to go to the Supreme Court. The Jack Phillips case was $10 million. Alliance Defending Freedom has had their technology canceled. Zoom canceled them. Their website said, "No, we're not going to service you anymore." Many people on the internet call them the anti-LGBTQ group. They're considered a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Association. But they're the only ones, very few, that standing up to the government, the agencies, and even private companies that have become de facto regulators and censors. And it's led to unprecedented power against those of maybe unpopular religious or even political beliefs. And it's become such an ideology that it's really put groups of people into 2 categories. You're either the oppressed or the oppressors. And as a result, people who deeply held religious beliefs live in fear. 60% of employees said they were concerned that their company would punish them for expressing their religious or political views. Now, Jordan Peterson expressed it really well. He said, for us to even have free speech, you have to run the risk of offending each other. That's the very essence of free speech. Offending somebody is the natural consequence of free speech. It's going to occur. That's why China says you can believe what you want so long as that doesn't cause disruption. And if you think free speech isn't a threat, then the burden of proof is on you. Because if you look globally, China being one example, and historically, it's been threatened. And quasi-government agencies and corporations are playing a role in suppressing those with deeply held religious beliefs. And the capital markets, and I'm being in it, they work because of free speech and because of these deeply held Judeo-Christian values. Take that away and you create an atmosphere of fear. And I think about it from an analogy of the Golden Gate Bridge. When they made the Golden Gate Bridge, when they're first building it, I can't imagine the fear that existed of being able to work on a construction that was as high as it was. When they decided to put a safety net underneath it, productivity went up 25%. If somebody fell down onto the safety net, they called them the Halfway to Hell Club. But it did save lives. But more importantly, it reduced the fear and made everyone much more productive. And so this idea of fear that exists in the marketplace, whether you're in the school or whether you're in healthcare or whether you're a small business owner, the idea that you're unable to express your deeply held convictions, and I don't care necessarily what your ideology is, but the idea that we can't offend each other is the very essence of suppression of free speech. And so I'm very thankful for Alliance Defending Freedom. I will put some more links in the show notes. And I just wanted to make sure you knew that there was an organization that is out there that is defending those that are having their speech suppressed. And I will tell you this also, when it gets to the Supreme Court and oftentimes in states, they are winning. I have a lot of hope in the future. I know this is a challenging time, but I do. Sometimes it's Pollyannic, but most of the time, my hope is rooted in truth and reason, and of course, in my faith. And remember, you think different when you think long-term. Have a great day.